It's a pleasure to be here. I know some of you. I also, so Ben here was in a class just 2 months ago, so he's going to hear the same thing again, but in a very condensed fashion. Okay, so he was in the NISM program a few months ago. What I want to tell you today is just give you a brief kind of an introduction to this to the topic. This is when we talk influencing, and especially when we talk the psychology of influencing. We have a particular model in the school, and it takes roughly about a day for us to develop this model in any of the programs that we do. So I decided I'll give you some snippets. I won't even call them the highlights. I'll just point out a few things that we do in the program. But what I also wanted to tell you is that a whole bunch of these ideas that we are talking about, they come from research. So they come from psychology journals, they come from economics journals, and I'm just going to show you in one of the journals, I'm just going to show you a page from a journal at some point and tell you that's actually what it is that we read, and we extract that and then we bring it to the classroom. Okay, so we don't impose on you and ask you to go and read those psychology journals, which tend to be somewhat dry. Okay, so but I just want you to get a flavor of the basis, the kind of the empirical, the underlying basis of what it is that we do here. What we do in this particular aspect of any of the leadership programs influencing. We're very, very fortunate that there is a fantastic research tradition and there is scholarship that we can all claim to be hugely reliable and replicable. So that's the kind of things that we would like to bring. So that's what my idea is, to give you a flavor of that, but also to tell you that where it is that it is coming from. But doing this, so those of you who know me, I try to do something new. Every time I come up, I try to do something new. So I said, why not use this as a basis for me to write a little case, a little exercise, which I'm going to pilot with you. Okay, so why not? So let's try it out. If it fails, it fails. Okay, so that's what we do. It's part of experimenting, but I'm hoping it won't. Okay, so there is some thought that went into it and into writing it, and for me, it was a welcome break from. So what Margie talked about running the school, it's not that. It's the school running my life for the last 4 or 5 months. So it was a welcome break that I could actually apply my mind to try to do something interesting for me. Okay, so the exercise itself was somewhat of an intellectual enterprise. So we'll try to do this in the last about 20 minutes. This is an exercise that I'd like to run with you. So here's what, so when you talk influence in LBS, but also in other schools where some of our colleagues are, our mentors, our students, so you go to these other schools. So this is it's a tripartite kind of like a model that we develop. So the first of them is based on research which you all will be probably familiar with. Okay, so this is research that got enormously popular with a book by it was originally a book by Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote this wonderful book called Blink many years ago. But it was based on research that was conducted among by lots of different people, most prominent among them Daniel Kahneman. Okay, and if you've not read Daniel Kahneman's book Thinking Fast and Slow, I suggest you do. Okay, so this is a book that is well worth reading. So that's one part of what we're going to be talking about, is to say that getting an understanding of how the brain processes information presents us with an opportunity about how to communicate information to people. If I communicate in the following manner, this is likely to be the decision that they're going to be making, which is the kind of decision that I want them to be making. So this is where it comes from. So understanding how the brain processes information and how people make decisions gives us an opportunity to present information in a manner that the decision that I want adopted will get adopted. Okay, so I'm going to give you some ideas from Kahneman and Tversky, but also the other people, the other kind of people who operate in this area, and I'll say that gives us some ideas about how I present information. So that's the first part of the model. I'm just going to give you 2 examples. Okay, so I'm not making any claim about comprehensiveness. I just want to present it to you and to say, go and read Kahneman's book. You will get 100 such ideas. Okay, so there are 2 that I'll present today, but Kahneman's book will have 100, if not more than that. The second set of ideas that I just want to introduce to you has an even longer tradition than Kahneman's ideas. Okay, so this is a tradition which is like classic social psychology from the 1930s, the 1940s, but also all the way right up to now. This is like a very, very classic social psychology. taking problems that are out there in the real world, so how do I get people committed to the war effort? This is like talking about the 1930s and the 1940s. How do I make sense of people who have been brainwashed in prisoner of war camps? So how do I make sense of that? So these are the kind of ideas that people were working with and were trying to answer, were trying to solve. And some of the other problems were, how do I get people from different ethnicities, how do I get them to work together? So these were the classic kind of social psychology problems. And the ideas that came up from there, so the kind of the thoughts and the research that came up from there is also very, very informative for us in trying to understand how it is that I influence people. So if I understand how people can get brainwashed, then that's fairly good kind of information for me. If I'm we won't call it brainwashing because we're much too polite. We call it how do I influence people? So that's the second kind of a tradition that I want to just introduce to you. I want to in that in particular. This is a very simple recognition that we are a complex bundle of motives, so we are not just self-interested people who relentlessly pursue our self-interest in any kind of situation. We also have other motives that are out there. We have familial kind of obligations. We have obligations towards other people. We want to get along in a group, so these are other kinds of motives that are also there in a human being. So we want to look at and we say, do we know when a particular motive becomes salient? Do we know how we can create a situation so that a motive which will give me a particular outcome can become salient? For example, we know that liking is a very powerful motive in influencing, so we tend to listen to things that people who we like, when they tell us what certain kinds of things, A, we believe them, and B, we will also do what it is that they're asking us to do. Are there systematic things that we can do to make the other party at that point in time make liking salient for them? I'm not, so I want to be very careful. It's not I'm trying to make the other party like me. What I'm saying is I'm trying to make liking the salient motive that is operating in that particular interaction. So to try and make a motive salient, what are the precursors to try to make those motives salient? There are lots and lots of research on this topic, best captured by a book that is at least 25 years old now, by a guy by the name Cialdini, and his book he called Influence. Okay, I think it's only 1/3 of influence, but he called it Influence. It's difficult to have a title which says 1/3 of influence. So do get that. Okay, so that's another book that I would strongly recommend that you get. The third of what is there is, and this comes from people trying to understand how juries made decisions. So again, very, very, very important social kind of a problem. When you're talking about a collective, you're putting people together in a group, you're trying to understand how this group, the operations that the group has, how it has an impact on the final decision that's adopted by the group. Tons of literature on this, both from the economic tradition and from the psychology tradition. I want to pick up one and I want to talk to you about that, to say that having an understanding of the kind of procedures that a group uses will give us very, very important tools about how it is that we can get our way going forward in groups. So I'm going to pick up one and I'm going to talk about that. So two ideas about how to present information, one idea about how to make a particular motive salient, and one idea about just some understanding about group procedures. So that's the plan that we have. We have 45 minutes, so this is an ambitious plan, but we'll get through it. Okay, so this is the goal. Do stop me at any point, just stop me, and we can talk about an idea and develop it, then we can throw away the rest of those ideas, so we don't need to bother. So let's start with the first. Okay, so I said, how do I, so when I look at it, what is it that I actually do? I want to show you some data. This is an experiment that was conducted in the early 1990s. It was published in the early 1990s. So let me tell you the experiment itself, and then you can start paying attention to the data that I've put up. So so it's called the decoy effect, but let me explain what it is. So an experiment that happened in a psychology laboratory in Stanford University. Incredibly clever kind of students, undergraduate students, come and participated. When they finished with the experiment, they used to be paid $6 in those days. Okay, so you participated 1 hour, you got $6. So in the first of the conditions, so people participated in the experiment, they were leaving. They were told that today we have a very, very interesting option. So you can get your $6, what it is we promised you, or you can get this super fancy pen, so you can take one of these two, take any one of those. Even in those days, the cross pen was worth more than $6. Okay, so it was worth more than $6. I don't know how much more, but it was worth more than $6. The base information, which is what we have in condition 1, group 1, The base information is that a majority of people ended up taking the $6. Around 2/3 of the people said, let's take the $6. So that's what is the base information we're working with. Another group of people were given the exact same choice, but they were also given something else. So they were told the exact same thing, which is today we're doing a kind of like this is the option available to you. Here is $6, or you can take this cross pen, or you can take this other pen, which was not so nice. Okay, they didn't tell them it's not so nice, but this is what was the choice presented to them: $6, a cross pen, a not so nice pen. For now, let's just take a look at this. Okay, so let's look at the number of people who've taken the cross pen. It increased from 36 to 46%. That's a 10% swing that has taken place. We've replicated, not we, many people have replicated these kind of findings that are out there. There are also 2% of the people who took the not so nice pen. Okay, so there always are going to be problematic people in every experiment. Okay, so we ignore them, okay, and we say, we don't want to talk about these guys, we want to talk about just this. Okay, so this is what it is that we want to be talking about. So the 10% increase that took place there. Those of you who have like some kind of econ training here, you know that this one is called a dominated choice. So it's said that this one, you have a cross pen that, in all, like all the dimensions, it is better in all its qualities than a not so nice pen. It's just better in all the qualities, which means that a dominated choice you enter into a choice set, it should not have an impact at all. So people should take this out. This is the same as this. Really, this is the same as this. But why did this happen? So this is the important question for us. Why did this happen? And it happens not just here, it happens in lots of different places. So why did this happen?
Because people will make a comparison.
Very good. So it's the comparisons. Okay, so this is what it is. People find it incredibly hard to ignore comparative information that is presented to them. We just cannot, even though we think that this is not information that I should be paying attention to. It is senseless for me to be thinking about this not so nice pen. I cannot but compare. And once I compare this cross pen suddenly, so in contrast to $6, it may have been roughly the same, but now I'm looking at like, a not so attractive pen, the qualities of the cross pen will start shining a little bit more in comparison. It's called the decoy effect because this one is a decoy. We really don't want, these 2% of the people have like, not done what we wanted them to do. It's a decoy, okay? They're not supposed to pick a decoy, but what the decoy does is the target, it makes it much, much more salient now, okay? So that's the reason why it's called the decoy effect. Now we look at it and we say generalize beyond, okay? So think about what is this, so what does it actually mean for us in lots of like influence? So we're trying to look and say what does it mean for us in an influence situation? I don't know you, but I've been in so many situations where people say this is not something that we can compare. This is an apples and oranges situation, so people say this oftentimes. This is apples and oranges. You're asking me to compare apples and oranges. What this principle tells us is that if you're in an apples and oranges situation, you want people to pick the apple. You throw a not so nice apple into the mix. That's all it is. So you're looking at it and saying, I want people to pick the apple. I put a not so nice apple. The apple becomes something that becomes a little bit more prominent. I'm not saying everyone picks it, but you increase the likelihood that the apple is picked by introducing the not so nice apple. Okay, so that's the general thing that you want to take away from here to say, think about the choice set strategically. So that's all. So think about the choice set strategically. Think about the comparisons that are going to be made, and that gives you some kind of an advantage in the situation. It is possible that people will end up picking the decoy. So I always say this when I talk, to look at this. I think about Jeremy Corbyn as a decoy that went wrong. Okay, so I look, it's possible. So be careful, okay, about what the decoy is. This is something that you need to be. So the not so nice pen, if people pick, you should still be okay with that. Okay, so you need to be a little careful about that. But this could happen. Okay, so this is what you need to be thinking about. Again, where it comes from. Okay, so this is quite something you can pick up and you can see this is replicable. You see this in a lot of different situations. I don't have the time to sit down and explain the full psychology of it, but it's captured very nicely with this one like word, comparisons. Okay, think about the comparisons that are out there. I want to introduce a second one, okay? Sorry, I just wanted to show you this data. This is so The Economist, which we all know is like a highly respected magazine. About 3 or 4 years ago, they had the misfortune of actually putting out an ad like this, asking people for subscription and subscribing to one of two offers. It caught the eye of a behavioral economist by the name Dan Ariely, so he looked at it. Dan Ariely, of course, is not going to let this lying down, so he did an experiment on this just to point out that The Economist was attempting to pull wool over the eyes of like its intended subscribers. So look at it, okay? So they had 3 options. Option 1 was was a digital subscription for $59. Option 2 was a print subscription for $125. Option 3 was a print plus digital subscription for $125. It's not anything more, so it required people to be amazingly crazy to say, I really definitely do not want digital, and which is why I'll go for this, so otherwise you just look at it, it's the same bloody thing, right? So this is what it is. But he picked it up and he saw this and he said, okay, this is kind of interesting. But he also went back a few months and said, wow, it's interesting. They had actually only 2, the first and the third one before, so that's what they had. I wonder why they changed and why they introduced this third one that was there, so they had print plus digital. Why is it that they had digital and they had print plus digital? Why did they introduce this print one only, so he wanted to look at it. He did a little experiment. This is all hypothetical, not like the cross pen and $6. So he asked his students, how many of you would pick, if these are the 3 options, how many of you would pick 1, how many of you would pick 2, how many of you would pick 3? These are sensible guys. 0% of them picked the second one, right? They said, we are not going to do this. Now what happens if you give people only the first and the third option? There's a complete swap that takes place there. So this is another, so very clearly, this is an example of the decoy at work, where the presence of the print only suddenly migrates people towards the print plus digital, so that's what it is that it does. To its credit, so if you go and look, The Economist on its website, it does carry details of this study, so they are not like, they put their hand up and say, yes, of course, we did something like this. So you can go and you can look at the study there in The Economist.
Excuse me, what are the consequences of this mechanism for presidential ministerial elections? Because rubbish candidates
Yeah.
can influence the whole game.
I think so. And sometimes the rubbish candidate gets elected. You're right. No. So very sorry. That's a flippant answer. In political science, it's called the stalking horse candidate. That's the whole kind of reasoning that is there, putting the rubbish candidate, an extreme candidate, in order for that person to prepare the ground for your candidate to come. So it's used there too. Stalking horse. STALK, stalking horse. Let me give you, this is an LBS story, okay? So the staff who are here will appreciate this story. I just want to give you, so look at this. Many years ago, the school decided that we have limited space and therefore we're going to go to 4 sessions in a day, okay? So just read this, 4 sessions in a day. We used to have 3, we went to 4 sessions in a day, okay? So this is where. So much so that the lunch, you will discover suddenly we were having lunch at 11 o'clock because 11 to 12:45 was the lunch break. But look, so this particular timetable that got introduced, it opened up an opportunity now for faculty to say that if I'm teaching different streams of an MBA program, I will teach them back to back. I'll teach the first and then I'll go and teach the second, the third and the fourth. I'm done with my teaching in one day. Then the rest of the 4 days in the week, I can spend time on my research, okay? And I'll just do this over 10 weeks and I'm done. This is something that it was a possibility, for faculty, this was a possibility. But what actually did take place, and this is true, any kind of an examination of this, you look at it and say that doing this, anything more than 2, if you're teaching the same thing again a third time, there is a decrement in quality in the way that you're actually teaching. And student experience is not so good. Okay, so this is a fact. So anytime you see this when you're teaching again and repeating the same thing again over a period of time, there is a decline in quality, especially if it happens on the same day. So we wanted to introduce this kind of a cap which said that we do not want people to teach more than twice. Okay, so in any given day they can teach. They can pick any of those 2, but not more than twice. 2 sessions in a day is all it is that they need to teach. So we need to sell this to the faculty, okay? So, and I was actually at that time, I was on one of those bodies that were out talking about this proposal, and that said, yes, this is a reasonable proposal, okay? So we just need to communicate this. So there are two messages that we can put out to faculty, okay? And these are, by the way, I'm not making this up. This is exactly what it is that people were talking about in that meeting, okay? Since then, I've gone and I've done my own informal poll, and I have a belief about what is good and what is not so good. But here are the two ones that you can give to people, two messages, okay, that you want to give to faculty. The first is to say, you know, this is message A, that when looking at this, the data is suggesting to us that sessions taught after the second one, you know, so tend to like decline in terms of like student rated experience of that class. It might have been on account of faculty fatigue or boredom or whatever it is, okay, so it could be on account of that. That's like the truth. You just want to put this out. There's a further message, so that's one. There's another one which we could have said, the first one, exactly the same as this. But in addition, we also say, and we care, by the way, for you, your health is going to deteriorate if you teach like 4 classes in a row. You know, you'll get like leg, backache, and so on. You can this is the self-interest of faculty members. Which message? So let's do a show of hands, okay? So which message do you think is the more compelling one? Is it A, just this, or is it B, which this plus this? Which is the more compelling one? B? Let's do a show of hands. Anyone think A? 1, 2, 3. You know, okay. You know. Why?
It kind of feels like you're overselling it to me on B.
Okay.
It's like, I get what you're saying, and then you just go, and by the way, also all these other things. You're trying to convince me, and I'm reading it, but you're trying to convince me.
Okay. Overselling. Okay. Others? Yes.
This is counterintuitive, and this is like a smart lecture.
Okay.
I think it would be the counterintuitive answer.
Okay. Okay. Go for the counterintuitive answer. That's a very, very good heuristic in any class at LBS. You know. So, so yes. Any other? Yes.
I think you should be straightforward, and even I mean, if the teachers here are not prepared to listen the truth or accept the reality, then one will wonder really if it's needed. The message B.
Okay. Do we even need the message B? I mean, message B, there might be some truth to this. I don't know. Okay. I'm not going to claim that there is no truth at all to it. There might be some truth to this. Okay. So let me tell you. Okay. So an overwhelming, when I give this simultaneously. Okay. So anytime, I'm not going to do this because we have another exercise to do. Please remember, this is already done. We have the results. So this one, when we give to people individually, people find A more convincing than they find B. When we present it simultaneously to people, they say, okay, I would pick B over A. Okay, so this is what it is that you would get. So just as on a 7-point scale, I ask somebody, which one do you find? So it's separate. Okay, so I give half the class, you know, I give this, half the class I would give B, half the class, they always find A to be more convincing than B. Part of it could be overselling, you know, so part of it could be, but that's not my story. Okay, so I want to just put this down. So let's explore why you think that could be the case. Okay, so why is it that people would find, and some of it admitting that there is some overselling that's happening there, but let's unpack what that overselling is. Yes.
I think because for me, if I love my profession and I love the thing I'm doing, and if in any way I will see that my performance is not up to the mark, that will really affect me much more than my health or anything else.
Okay. Okay.
I think that will be for me a passion.
So it's a very, very strong argument, which is what you're saying. You know, so this is a very strong argument you're saying. So I will be convinced by that. If my identity is as a teacher, this is a strong argument. So why adding something else, which is also a reasonable argument? Why is that a problem? Yes.
In the first one, you're backing it by saying that the data suggests that the sessions are like that, whereas in the second one, you're kind of making a vague statement.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Very good. Thank you. So here is what is, again, you know, so let me show you another finding and then I'll come back to this. Okay, so we'll relate it back to this. So this is a study that, I thought I'd have time to actually get you to vote and so on, but it's 45 minutes is short. So, so let me show you this study, and the answer is a counterintuitive answer, so I'm not even going to go and ask you. Okay, so this is where. So a study done by an economist from the University of Chicago, where he went to baseball card trade shows. Okay, so in the US, there are like people who are quite serious collectors of baseball cards, okay, the people who will buy baseball cards, collect baseball cards and so on. And there are trade shows where people, they can go and they can buy and sell, and there are auctions there that takes place. So this guy went to this auction, and what he did is he constructed a deck of 10 extremely good baseball cards, you know, so these were all pristine, new, brand new, no flaws in them. He put them and he auctioned them, and what I'm showing to you is the average bid. It's not the winning bid, it's the average bid in that auction. It was a sealed bid auction, so what you have is the average bid here. So there are people who also make a living by being traders, you know, the middle people who are buying and selling those ones. Not surprisingly, these dealers were giving a little less than the non-dealers. The collectors were like offering a little bit more for the same cards. So there's another set of cards that were out there, the exact same 10, you know, the really nice cards that were there, but now he created a set of 13 cards, okay, so that is there, but the 3 cards, the 3 additional cards were a little torn in the side, a little stained and so on, so they were not perfect cards. They were they did have some positive value attached to it, because he went and he did like, you know, a survey, and people said, yeah, I'd pay 10-15p for these cards, I won't pay more than that. No one said that you need to give me money to take these cards off of you. You know, no one said that. There was no negative value associated with these cards. So now he auctioned this. Okay, so he auctioned this, knowing we have going to get a counterintuitive answer. Okay, so I just wanted to ask you this. Do you think both dealers and non-dealers will pay less for this new set? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, they are going to pay less.
Both, even the dealers? Not dealers. Okay. Both ended up paying less. Okay, so now you read down the top, the more is less is the effect that we call this. Okay, let's link it back to the previous slide. Okay, so let's link it back, because you find this. Okay, so this is there in pricing and so on. When you're doing this, when I'm packaging something together, when I'm putting the not so good with the good, not bad, I'm not saying bad with the good. Okay, so please remember this: good, not so good, I'm putting them together. The good also loses some of its like goodness. I mean, I don't know this word. Yeah, so goodness. It loses some of that value that is associated with it. So people are paying attention to the value of the set in its totality. You know, that is what it is that they're paying attention to. They're not actually paying attention to each individual item that's there. I also want to be clear here that 2 things I want to be. We are not saying this, that suppose it was a set of 10 cards, and by the way, I'm throwing in these 3 cards for free. That's a completely different psychology, okay, because that does not undermining this set. But putting it together in this set is undermining the set, okay, so it is just undermining the set that is out there. The second thing is, I'm not talking about good and bad. I'm not saying bad at all. That is not what it is that I'm saying. I'm saying good, and the not so good that I'm adding to it that is bringing it down. Okay, so this is what. So I'm not against a balanced argument where you give the pros and you give the cons. But what I'm saying is, what this research is suggesting is, when you have the pros, go with the strong pros. Okay, don't add not so strong pros there and pretend that they're strong. That is what it is that is what we look at and we will be commenting on. This is, in psychology, we refer to it as argument dilution. Okay. So someone pointed this out. The first one talks about data. So as you said, you know, it talks about data. The second one is a vague argument that could be right, you know, so there is some kind of positivity associated with it. Even though it still is another pro, because it is not like data backed and because it is sufficiently vague, it is not so strong, it has undermined the really strong argument that was already being presented. Okay, so you might think that you're not losing much by presenting people with something else that was out there, but you are. Okay, so that's the point that I want to make, which is to say that more is not better in some situations, especially when it dilutes the quality of the first one that you're putting out there. Okay, we refer to this as argument dilution. So think about the set. What is the set that you're presenting to people? So the first was like comparisons. The second one was like, you know, what is the set that you're actually presenting to people? Read Kahneman and Tversky, you'll get a lot more such ideas. Okay. Let's jump to the second one. I just want to talk about one of the motives. Okay, so there are a whole bunch of motives. I said there is liking as a motive, but let's pick one which is not so obvious. You know, this notion of consistency. So though this current presidential elections in the United States, it it did shake my belief about the value of consistency. But let's base it on the research till now and treat this year as a bit of an anomaly. Okay, so Leicester also won the Premier League. So there's all kinds of mad things have happened this year. So let's just write off 2016. So look at this. Okay, so there is a very strong kind of a motive which we all have, which is a desire to be consistent. Okay, so we have a desire to be consistent in word and word. We are not, so if someone points out to us that that's not what it is that you said yesterday, you're changing your mind, it's an insult, in some sense. We feel it as some kind of an insult. We are also we have the strong motive for wanting to be consistent in word and deed. If I have said X today, I would like to also do X again. So it's it's something that is strong in me. It's a desire in me to be seen as consistent, to also be consistent. There are reasons for that. There are social kind of validation that happens for consistent people, but also internally we'd like to know who we are. So if you're always going to be behaving in an erratic fashion, it becomes difficult for us to even understand ourselves. So, but this motive is not always salient in any kind of given interaction. Okay, so it isn't salient, but you can. So let me give you one example of how, by making this motive salient, you can get what it is that you want from people. Okay, so this is what it is that I want to just put down to you. So let's begin. So with this one, very simple. So look at this example. So something happened. I always have, by the way, these come in bits and pieces, so I tell you the whole story. But when transplanting my slides onto this template for new exec education, something happened. So all my animations are gone. Okay, so I just want to put that. My challenges with technology continue. So let's look at. So this is a study, a great study that was done in the 1960s to illustrate an idea which is called the foot and door. So these two psychologists, they tied up with an organization that was interested in road safety, and what they wanted to do is to try and construct a particular request that most reasonable people would say no to. So this is what they constructed. They came up with going and knocking on people's doors and saying, we're part of this road safety organization, we'd like for you guys to help us, we'd like for you to put up this big sign in your front yard which says drive carefully. They always went for the homes, so they went in a neighborhood where people were house proud, they were garden proud, and this sign was designed in a fashion that most people would be repelled by it. Okay, so they'd say, no, I don't want to. So they went and they knocked on people's door. Everyone thought it was a reasonable, cause what they were going for, but very few people said, yes, I'll do it. Okay, so 17% of the people said, yes, we'll do this. This is what you get. But so this is the base rate. Okay, so so they constructed that. Then what they did is that an equally nice neighborhood, they went around, they're knocking, and then they asked these people, knocked on their door and said, we're part of this road safety organization, can you support us by displaying a little sticker either in your car or in your front window which says, be a safe driver. 90% of the people said yes this time. A week later, they go to the same people's home, they say, thank you so very much for being part of this community that is interested in safe driving. Now do you mind displaying this big sign in your front door? So do you mind actually doing this in your front yard? Around 70% of the people, around 80% of the people said yes. 70 times 80, so we're looking at this. This one is almost 70% of the people have said yes, when only 17% of the people have said yes in the first request. What has happened here? What's happened here? Yes.
I think in first case, I will also not do it because I will just think about the beauty of my house.
Mm-hmm.
In second case, there is a possibility that I look at every day at that message and perhaps it clicks with me, and then I will feel, okay, perhaps this is a good cause, and
Okay.
there will be a way, I think.
Okay.
So you're also taking on a journey. So you start small.
Right.
And build up to yourself.
So you're breaking down their resistance somewhat, right? So you're going on a
It's
journey.
also a process of self-identification with the message and belonging to a group in the community, and therefore the hurdle rate to actually get people to do more and more of that declines because they are part of that.
Very good. So it's consistency in two different ways, right? So one is this it's consistent with what it is that we've started off, but it's also consistent with my self-image now. So you've allowed me into this group of really nice people who care about road accidents, but the threshold that you set was really low, so I got into it. Now when you raise the bar, it's easy for me to say yes. In fact, it's very hard for me to say no, because then I feel like a hypocrite. Okay, so this is what it is. This is what it is doing, because I'm now inconsistent with the image that I have crafted for myself as the person who really cares about road safety and so on. So that's what it's doing. So it's consistency in two different ways. It's consistent with my past actions, so what I've taken, that's the journey, but it's also consistency in terms of the identity that I have crafted for myself. So what this has done, it's created the opportunity for the consistency motive to be salient. Okay, so this is what it has done. So everyone cares about consistency, but we don't care about consistency at every point. You have to make people care about consistency if you want this to happen, and this is one technique that you use to get people to become consistent. Okay, so this is what it is. When we say the motive itself is there, but it might be dormant in some circumstances, what do I do to make it salient is what we look at, and this is one of the techniques that is out there. This is a technique that is used by a lot of organizations, volunteering organizations. Getting people, the first step that people take in any kind of a situation is the important one. You reduce the kind of hurdle, people are likely to take the first step, then they're likely to form their own reasons to take the second, the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and so on. It doesn't have to be blatant in this fashion, a sticker and then this big sign. It could be a sticker, it could be a postcard, then it could go on, so you get the general kind of a point that is there, is that you need to, in this instance, the way that you make consistency work for you is make the first step easier, and then those next steps that come on, that for people to do what you're asking them to do, become a little easier for them to do. Yes? Should we do the exercise? Ready to? How much time do I have? 20 minutes? 15 minutes. Okay. Let's do it. It's no. So I'm going to call this side the green side, this side the orange thing. Okay. So what I have here, okay, I want you to form groups of 3, okay. The first page is the Vice President of Finance, okay. So the first page is the Vice President of Finance, but the group itself, so the second page is the Vice President of Operations, and the third is Vice President of Sales. So the Vice President of Finance, for whatever reason, we've determined is the chair of this group, okay. So this is the person. If you can just form your group of 3, read these, what is there, and then just follow the instructions, okay. Just follow these instructions. And even if you can't, here's what we have. Just take 10 minutes for it, and then I'll summarize this. Okay. Do we have at least the semblance of a decision? Yes? Okay, I'm only going to ask the chair, which is the VP of Finance of each group, okay? How many of you want to hire on this side? How many of you recommend hiring? The VP of Finance, the group as such, right? So we're talking about shortlist. Put up your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. How many of you on this side? Shortlist. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Did I count you? Let's count you anyway. Again. 8. Yes? Okay. More people put up their hands again after that, so I'm just going to stop counting now. We'll ask you why. Okay, the people. Can I just pick up some group and say why do you want a shortlist? Let's ask this group.
We discussed it quite a bit, and I think it was interesting to see how the different information we all had. The main thing was an achievement that she had, which was that key policy change, which if you kind of unpack it, does tick all the 3 boxes.
Okay.
It will be a confidence thing and an ability to take a stand.
Okay.
And if you convince them to make that change, then you must have kind of good communication skills because people followed your advice.
Okay, very good. So unpacking the different pieces of information. So even if we may have disagreed on the criteria, but getting the new information helped us get that. Is there any group that decided no? Why not?
When it came to hiring, because there was a negative point to it, we didn't want to shortlist it because obviously the balance was there. But it's interesting you asked the VP of Finance because he had the motive to actually hire the person.
Right.
So, I mean, and whereas when there's other things, you're overriding the
Okay. Okay. Any group here said no? Yeah, why not?
I think the main reason was that the VP of sales met in person and put a lot of weight onto that rather than information from other sources.
Okay. Okay. So let me just show you, like, okay, so there is a reason why we have this in green and in orange. By the way, you had exactly the same information. Okay, so just so there's no difference at all. Now I want to know the people there here. How many of you began with a vote first? You know, so did you began with a vote? And what is the vote? The first the initial vote? 2 to 1 is the vote that you had, and then you started discussing the information that that actually you took place. Did you have a vote? Any of you began with a vote? No. Okay. So first of all, let me just tell you, this is a failed experiment. Let's begin with that. This is a paper, by the way, on which we base this, so that you know what I'm not giving you. Okay, so let me go to the the finding itself, which is actually replicated many times. There's no exercise on this, but we have to tweak this exercise. So let me get to this. This is what it is that you had. Okay, so as information. Okay, so this is the kind of information that you had, where you're looking at and you say that, you know, so this is, you can talk about multi-criteria kind of decision making. You can look at it, you have all of these ones that are there, and each one of you, it is entirely possible based on the information that you have, you've like reached a slightly different conclusion about whether the person meets the threshold criteria that is necessary, okay? And this is the kind of decision where we're saying it's what we will refer to oftentimes as conjunctive, okay? So you really need to, for people to agree on both. It's not compensatory, you know, so you can't be hugely self-confident and not have communication skills. You can't have, you need to have both. This is something that you need to have both. So this is the information that you had. But the difference was with, you know, so with one group, what we asked them to do is start with a simple accept or reject. Begin with that, you know, start with that, which is to say, begin with the vote and then begin to discuss after that. So you have, this is the kind of vote that you have. So typically, which is 2 people against and 1 person for, that's the vote, overall kind of a vote that you're going to. In all of the cases that we have, okay, so mathematically we can prove this, which is what I showed you, that mathematics that is there, but which is like generalized. It just doesn't have to be like, you know, a 3-person group. It just doesn't have to be 2, like, you know, things that you're talking about. But mathematically, the likelihood that this group will reject a candidate is higher, you know, so this is higher when they begin with a vote, okay? So they begin with a vote, but they don't have very much discussion, because again, the psychology of juries, the psychology of group decision making, what it says is, when we take an early vote, we spend quite a lot of time, rather than sharing information, defending the position that we have already taken, okay? So I said no to this person. I'm going to spend a lot of time now arguing about why this person should not be selected. Information sharing does not happen, okay? It happened here, unfortunately for this experiment. It happened here in this group. I blame you for that. But the theory, okay, is that it doesn't happen, but also we have, like, you know, a lot of evidence that says it doesn't happen. Now the people who had the green, okay, so this is a group. This is what I would have expected, that 5 or 6 of you would have said no, and everyone would have said yes, is what I would have expected when I'm running this exercise. Because now you look at it and you say, how about, and here, the only difference was I asked you to take an early vote. Here I asked people to discuss the criteria and then, like, you know, make a decision. Okay, so that's the difference between what I asked you to do and what I asked this group to do. So this one is called an evidence-driven kind of a decision making. So criteria by criteria, and then they make a decision, yes or no. If this happens, okay, so this happens, what you would expect is that people would like say, would reach and think and say, yeah, I kind of agree. If 2 of you are saying the person is good in this, that makes some sense to me. If 2 of you say this good in this, that makes sense to me. This group is more likely to say, I say yes to this person. Okay, I'm going to forward, I'm going to shortlist this person. A very simple takeaway from this is that groups that use evidence-based decision making, right? So they use this evidence-based decision making, are less conservative than groups that use the verdict-based kind of, like, you know, decisions that are there. That's the simple takeaway for you. Now, the exact opposite happens when we use a case which is called a disjunctive case, which is an or. the person needs to be good in X or in Y, you'll get a different result. Okay, so I'm not going to talk to you about it. All that I want to highlight to you is to say that understanding the group procedures will enable you to understand the final decision that the group makes. If I'm the VP of finance, I want this person hired, I am going to go down the route of evidence-based. I'm not going to go verdict-based. As the chair, I will not ask people straight off, what is your opinion? Because they'll start defending their, their opinion about the person. Instead, I'll say, what is your information about this person on this criteria? What is your information about this person on this criteria? And then I'll go ahead and I'll start. After that, the deliberation, I will finally make a decision. Okay, so that's what it is I wanted to put out to you with this little exercise that we did. Let me stop here, and overall, let me just summarize. So I just introduced to you briefly the notions of it's useful for you to think about how people make decisions, because that gives you an opportunity to present information and choices in a manner that people tend towards your choice, what it is that you're looking at. So that's what it is we talked about, we said the thing about contrast and the idea, the example about the dilution of arguments. We said that human beings are a bundle of lots of different motives. I only talked about one of them, consistency, but there are lots of others. We talk about obligation. We talk about a sense of belonging to groups. We talk about liking. There are lots of these different motives, and there's a lot of evidence that tells us what can we do to make the motive the salient motive in an interaction. So think about it in that fashion. When you're in a collective, think about the procedures that the collective is going to be using, and that gives you some tools to get the decision that you want. I'll stop here. I'm way past time and cut short into your tea break. I apologize for that, but thank you very much.